Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell for new stories. In the distant future, the intergalactic species known as the RYK2 have encountered humanity for the first time. The RYK2 are a highly advanced, aquatic species known for their incredible intelligence, telepathic abilities, and technologically advanced ships. Their empire spans multiple star systems, but they have never encountered a species like humans. The story begins aboard a RYK2 scout ship that has just arrived in Earth's solar system. The ship is sleek and shimmering, designed to be able to seamlessly blend with both aquatic and space environments. The crew, led by Captain Zyron, is tasked with observing Earth and its native species, with the goal of determining whether humans are a threat or potential allies. They've heard whispers of humanity's intelligence, their boldness in space exploration, and the strong emotions that humans often display. But when the RYK2 first set eyes on the humans, they are utterly confused, perplexed, and fascinated. The humans, who have already made strides in space exploration and are on the verge of interstellar travel, are unlike any species the RYK2 have encountered. However, what truly baffles them is a unique and seemingly absurd reaction they experience upon seeing the human form, particularly human nudity. To the RYK2, whose biology is completely different, seeing a human in a state of undress triggers an involuntary reaction that they cannot explain, a flood of physical sensations that leaves them feeling wet in an entirely unexpected way. The concept of nudity, so normal for humans, is completely alien to them. For the RYK2, nudity is a private, sacred thing, and it's deeply tied to the display of emotions and status within their culture. They're used to telepathic signals conveying intimacy or privacy, not to the physicality of the human body. Captain Zyron and his crew's confusion is compounded by the fact that the RYK2, despite their intelligence, have never had to deal with such an emotionally and physically charged reaction. They begin to question if this overwhelming response to human nudity is something intrinsic to humanity's biology or an emotional phenomenon they can study further. Their telepathic network, which is normally capable of analyzing and understanding the emotions of other species, cannot interpret what they feel in response to human forms. This, of course, leads to a humorous situation where the RYK2 crew starts to awkwardly discuss their newfound dilemma. Their attempt to analyze the sensation leads to even more confusion, as they realize they cannot even replicate the feeling in their advanced technology or biomechanical systems. As they send reports back to their higher-ups in the RYK2 empire, they become increasingly intrigued by the strange yet powerful response humans provoke. This unexpected reaction sparks the first major shift in their perception of humanity, causing them to pause their mission's initial purpose of gathering information for strategic alliances or military evaluations. Instead, they focus on studying the emotional and physiological nature of human beings, beginning with their perceptions of sexuality, privacy, and social customs. Captain Zyron convenes a meeting with his top officers. "We must understand this," he says, trying to make sense of the wet feeling. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Trax, offers the most logical theory. Perhaps their bodies release this response as a signal of attraction or danger. But Zyron quickly shoots down this suggestion. He remembers his training in diplomacy and insists, if we are to build any understanding or alliance with them, we cannot mistake this sensation for something as simple as attraction. We must first understand what this means in their culture. Meanwhile, human representatives are growing curious about the visitors. The humans are unaware of the RYK2's internal turmoil over something as mundane as nudity, but they are eager to engage in diplomatic talks. A small team of humans from the United Nations, including a brilliant ambassador named Dr. Alara Winters, has been selected to interact with the aliens, despite the confusion surrounding the arrival of these enigmatic beings. Dr. Winters and her team are fascinated by the RYK2's advanced technology and telepathic communication but quickly realize that the RYK2's strange behavior toward nudity may not be a simple misunderstanding. Her team, which includes a variety of specialists in human biology and psychology, begins to draw connections between the RYK2's telepathic reactions and the biology of their own species. Dr. Winters speculates that the RYK2 might be facing some cultural shock or biological confusion due to the natural, non-sexual nature of human nudity in certain contexts. As the two species begin to interact more, the initial confusion turns into a series of awkward but humorous exchanges. The RYK2, who communicate in telepathy, try to avoid sending out too many signals, fearing they might reveal too much about their internal wetness reactions. Meanwhile, Dr. Winters tries to maintain a professional demeanor, even as the strange atmosphere creates moments of lighthearted tension. Through these interactions, the RYK2 begin to slowly understand that human nudity, especially in their more relaxed environments, does not carry the same significance as it does in their own species. But what the RYK2 fail to realize is that the mere exposure to human forms is affecting them in more ways than they anticipated, especially in a diplomatic context where every subtle cue and body language matters. The part ends with a growing realization that the cultural divide between the RYK2 and humans may not be just about biology, but also about emotions, intimacy, and the meaning of the body in different societies. The RYK2 may have advanced technology, but they are still learning the most basic truths about human nature, things that even their vast knowledge cannot explain. As days pass aboard the RYK2 scout ship, Captain Zyron grows increasingly frustrated. The mystery surrounding human nudity, and the overwhelming involuntary reaction it stirs within him and his crew, is something he cannot ignore. The sensation is neither pleasant nor uncomfortable, but it's overwhelming, a strange wave of physical awareness that doesn't make sense in their sophisticated understanding of the universe. It is as if the presence of the human form calls to something primal within them, something they cannot control. In an attempt to gain more insight, Zyron arranges a formal meeting with Dr. Elara Winters, who has now been designated as the primary human liaison for the RYK2. The humans are aware of the odd behavior of the alien species, and while most have found it to be a minor cultural quirk, some are starting to suspect there's more to the RYK2's reactions than just curiosity. The RYK2 have made their headquarters on a station orbiting Earth, a neutral ground for both species to meet and discuss their future relations. A large, open hall is prepared for the next meeting. Zyron arrives early, alone, with his mind focused on his mission, to understand the humans and their bizarre impact on the RYK2 psyche. As he waits, he looks out through the observation windows at Earth, its blue oceans and swirling clouds, a familiar sight, yet one that feels strangely distant. For a brief moment he wonders if humanity is as different as they seem, or if there's something about their existence that the RYK2 have failed to grasp. Dr. Winters enters the room accompanied by her team. She offers a polite but cordial smile to Zyron, and they exchange greetings. Despite the tension that lingers between them, on both sides, there's a growing sense of mutual respect. Zyron's eyes briefly flicker to her attire, as humans have a different concept of modesty. To him, this is another layer of complexity. Clothing, while practical, also carries its own emotional and social weight in human society. But he pushes the thought aside and focuses on the task at hand. Captain Zyron, Dr. Winters begins, we're here to discuss the purpose of your mission and the concerns both our species have had. I understand your crew has been disturbed by human cultural practices, especially concerning the issue of nudity. Zyron nods gravely. It is difficult to comprehend, he admits, though his voice betrays a sense of uncertainty. Your species does not display nudity as a sign of intimacy or vulnerability, yet my crew's reactions are profound. It is as if we are overwhelmed by the sight of your forms. We cannot explain it. Dr. Winters remains composed. Yes, I've heard of your crew's involuntary responses. I believe what you're feeling may not be as unusual as you think. It's a biological reaction, I think, perhaps linked to how humans and other species respond to stimuli. But for us, nudity has less to do with attraction and more with freedom, self-expression, and sometimes just survival. Zyron, deeply intrigued, tilts his head slightly. Freedom and self-expression? How can a species expose their most vulnerable parts to others so openly? Is this not dangerous? Not necessarily, Dr. Winters explains. Humans have a much more complex relationship with their bodies. Nudity doesn't always have to be tied to attraction. We wear clothes because of practicality, social norms, and temperature. But in certain circumstances, such as art, relaxation, or even survival in harsh environments, we shed our clothing to feel a deeper connection to the world around us. Zyron is silent for a moment, trying to process the new information. So, your species deliberately exposes itself in non-sexual ways to connect with the environment? With one another? Dr. Winters nods. Exactly. For us, it's not always about sexuality. It's about comfort, vulnerability, and reclaiming something that others may find private or sacred. But why does it elicit such a strong response from us? Zyron asks, his voice tinged with both frustration and genuine curiosity. Well, Dr. Winters says, it's possible that your species' telepathic abilities are picking up on human emotions or signals in ways that are unfamiliar to you. Our bodies may exude pheromones or signals of relaxation or openness that you're responding to, subconscious cues perhaps. To us, these signs are normal, but for you they may be triggering a more intense, emotional reaction. Zyron's expression softens. Are you saying that your body's state of exposure is sending us signals? Not exactly, Dr. Winters replies. It's more that humans are not as physically private as you may be used to, and our bodies send subtle cues that our minds are not fully aware of. It's possible your species' telepathy is more attuned to these cues than we realize. The conversation shifts as the two sides discuss human culture, and Zyron begins to understand that the RYK2's telepathic abilities are both a gift and a curse. While they can easily pick up on emotions, their understanding of physicality and instinctual human reactions is still limited. They had assumed their advanced intellect and telepathic bonds would allow them to fully comprehend any species they encountered, but this vulnerability, this human sense of openness, presents an entirely new challenge. As the discussion continues, Dr. Winters offers an intriguing suggestion. Perhaps, Captain Zyron, your species could benefit from learning about human perspectives on vulnerability. I suggest an experiment. We have created a cultural exchange program, where humans and RYK2 can learn about each other's forms of self-expression. We can arrange for you to witness how humans interact with nudity in safe, controlled environments, places where it's about art, health, or relaxation. You might begin to see it in a new light. Zyron is hesitant. And you believe this will help us understand the wetness we experience? Dr. Winters smiles. It may not give you all the answers, but it will offer a deeper understanding of our culture. And maybe, just maybe, you'll come to understand that what you're feeling isn't a threat at all. The experiment is agreed upon, and the RYK2 ship is soon transported to Earth's surface, where the exchange begins. The first place they visit is a human art gallery, where nude sculptures and paintings are displayed. The RYK2's telepathic abilities allow them to sense the emotions behind each piece of art, each figure. The abstract forms, though confusing at first, begin to resonate with the RYK2 crew in ways they didn't anticipate. They sense the connection between humanity and the representation of the human body, its vulnerability, its grace, and its power. Zyron, still reeling from the emotional intensity, looks at one sculpture, a graceful depiction of a human woman. It doesn't elicit the same wet feeling as before, but there is something stirring deep within him. Something powerful, unexplainable, yet deeply human. Perhaps, this is what it means to be human, Zyron muses aloud, almost to himself. Dr. Winters, who has been observing the RYK2's reactions, smiles gently. Perhaps it is. As the exchange continues, the RYK2 begin to understand that nudity to humans is a form of expression and connection, a way of bridging the physical and emotional. The more they learn, the less threatening the response becomes. They still don't fully understand the reasons for their initial reaction, but they now know that it is a part of what makes humanity unique. The chapter ends with the RYK2 slowly letting go of their confusion and fear, beginning to embrace the complexity of human nature. In a universe full of strange and alien worlds, the one thing they hadn't expected was that the most profound lessons might come from something as simple as human vulnerability. As the days pass on Earth, Zyron and his crew continue their cultural exchange with the humans. Their experiences in art galleries, scientific labs, and public parks are teaching them about human forms of expression and self-awareness. Yet, Zyron is still struggling to fully grasp the depth of what he's learning. There are still questions he cannot answer, and despite the apparent progress, the strange emotional and physical reactions to human nudity linger in his thoughts. In an attempt to further understand humanity's relationship with nudity and vulnerability, Dr. Winters invites Zyron to observe a human spa. Humans are very much in touch with their bodies in environments like this, she explains, and you'll see that nudity is not tied to sexual attraction but rather a state of relaxation, healing, and comfort. Zyron, though hesitant, agrees. The idea of entering such a personal and exposed space is uncomfortable for him, but he senses that he must push through his discomfort to truly understand what it means to be human. The RYK2, despite their advanced intellect, have long relied on logic and telepathy to navigate the universe, but the nuances of human emotion and physicality seem to transcend their abilities. This cultural exchange is beginning to challenge everything Zyron once thought he knew about alien species. The spa is a serene, tranquil environment, unlike anything the RYK2 have encountered before. Humans move about, some sitting in steaming pools, others receiving massages or meditative treatments. The atmosphere is peaceful, free of tension, and everything in the space seems designed to encourage relaxation and comfort. Zyron watches as a human woman, fully nude, enters the heated pool, her body flowing through the water with ease, her face serene and peaceful. The scene is beautiful, graceful, and disarming. Zyron can feel the tranquility radiating from her, and for the first time he feels the wetness reaction in a new way, not as confusion or discomfort, but as a deep, involuntary empathy. Dr. Winters sits beside him, aware of his internal struggle. "What do you feel now, Captain?" she asks softly. Zyron struggles to find the right words. "It is different. This reaction I feel, it's not the same as before. It is peaceful. The human body in its natural state, in harmony with its surroundings. It's not about attraction. It's about something else." Dr. Winters nods. "Exactly. Humans have this complex relationship with their bodies. We separate the physical from the emotional in ways that might not make sense to you. But we've learned that our bodies can carry a lot of weight, stress, emotion, trauma, and sometimes, allowing ourselves to be vulnerable in front of others is a way to heal. It's not about being sexual, it's about being comfortable with who we are." Zyron remains silent, processing this new information. His mind works through the complexities of the human experience, trying to reconcile it with the RYK2 worldview. For the RYK2, emotions are shared through telepathy, not through physical acts. The very idea that nudity could symbolize vulnerability rather than weakness is difficult for Zyron to fully comprehend, but the more he observes, the more it begins to make sense. The human form without the armor of clothing is a symbol of strength, not fragility. Vulnerability, in this context, is not something to be feared, but something to be embraced as part of the human experience. Later that evening, Zyron returns to the RYK2 scout ship, his thoughts heavy with the weight of his observations. His crew members are still grappling with their initial reactions to human nudity, but Zyron's growing understanding begins to shift the mood on the ship. Lieutenant Trax, who had once been quick to dismiss the human form as something alien and uncomfortable, now approaches Zyron with a different perspective. "Captain," Trax begins, "I have been thinking about the reaction we felt, the wetness. I believe it's not something to fear. It's a sign of something deeper, something we are still learning to understand." Zyron nods slowly. "Yes, Lieutenant. I too have been thinking about it. I think it's not just about the body. It's about what that body represents. Humans have a way of presenting their true selves, without hiding behind pretense or protection. The wetness, the sensation we feel, it's not about desire. It's about connection." Trax looks confused. "Connection?" Zyron explains. "Yes. Perhaps it's our telepathy trying to understand the openness, the vulnerability, that humanity carries with them. In the RYK2 Empire, we hide nothing from one another, but we don't expose ourselves in such a way. We hide our feelings behind layers of thought and controlled communication. But the humans, they don't fear being vulnerable in front of each other. They do it openly, without shame, without hiding." Trax thinks about this for a moment. "Are you suggesting that their openness is something to be admired? That we should try to emulate their willingness to be exposed without fear?" Zyron smiles faintly. "Yes. I think we can learn from them. Maybe, it's not just their technology or their intelligence we should study. It's their emotional honesty. Their strength and vulnerability." Trax. "We RYK2 have always thought of ourselves as the most advanced, the most capable. But maybe we've been blind to a deeper truth. Perhaps the most advanced species isn't the one that hides behind walls of intellect, but the one that can fully embrace their own humanity." As Zyron speaks, a new understanding begins to form within him and his crew. The discomfort they initially felt in response to human nudity was not an obstacle but a gateway to a deeper connection. It was a response to humanity's ability to embrace themselves, to accept their imperfections, and to share those imperfections with others. In that sense, the human experience was far more advanced than the RYK2 could have imagined. The next day, Dr. Winters invites Zyron to observe a human gathering in the heart of a bustling city. Humans are engaged in a public art project. Some painting murals, others participating in physical performances, all while fully nude. The purpose of this event is to encourage openness and acceptance of the human body in its natural state. Zyron watches in awe as humans work together, their bodies moving with fluidity and confidence. There is no shame, no hesitation in their actions. They express themselves freely, and there is a sense of unity among them, as if the very act of being vulnerable brings them closer together. Zyron finally understands. It is not the human body that is remarkable, it is what the human body represents. The courage to be seen, to be vulnerable, and to connect with others in a way that transcends the physical. The RYK2, for all their power and intelligence, have never experienced this kind of emotional openness. They have never understood the beauty of sharing vulnerability as a form of strength. As the day comes to a close, Zyron turns to Dr. Winters. "I believe I understand now," he says quietly. It is not just about nudity. It is about what it represents. Humanity's ability to expose themselves, physically, emotionally, spiritually, is what makes them unique. It is a sign of their strength, not their weakness. Dr. Winters smiles, sensing the profound shift in Zyron's perspective. I'm glad you understand, Captain. And I hope, in time, more of your people will come to see it the same way. The cultural exchange between the RYK2 and humans continues to deepen, and Captain Zyron feels a growing sense of enlightenment. His time on Earth, immersed in human culture, has reshaped his understanding of vulnerability, connection, and strength. The RYK2, for all their technological advances and telepathic prowess, had failed to comprehend what made humans truly unique. Now, Zyron is beginning to see that it is not just the mind or the body that defines a species, but the emotional tapestry they weave between the two. But just as Zyron begins to feel the threads of understanding weaving together, a new challenge presents itself, one that forces both the RYK2 and the humans to confront their differences head-on. The RYK2, having absorbed much of human culture, now find themselves standing at a crossroads. Despite their growing respect for human emotional expression and openness, there remains one deeply rooted cultural taboo. The RYK2 view any form of intimacy between their species and humans as highly inappropriate. The telepathic bond that the RYK2 share with one another means that they are naturally in tune with each other's feelings, but the thought of crossing species boundaries feels unnatural to them. This barrier has been a topic of whispered conversations between the RYK2, and now Zyron, in his position of leadership, is being forced to face the uncomfortable question. Can RYK2 and humans share more than just cultural knowledge? It is in this moment that Zyron is approached by Dr. Winters once more. This time she is different, her expression more serious, her posture rigid with concern. It is rare to see her in such a state, and Zyron instinctively feels the gravity of whatever she has to say. Captain, she begins, her voice carrying an edge of uncertainty, there is something I need to discuss with you. Something personal. Zyron raises an eyebrow, intrigued by her change in demeanor. Go on, Dr. Winters. What is it? She pauses as though trying to gather her thoughts. I've been doing some thinking. About the nature of our exchange. And about the human response to you and your crew. Zyron's mind races, wondering if he is misunderstanding the nature of their conversation. What do you mean? Is there something troubling you about the exchange? No, she answers quickly, it's not that. But there is something I've observed. You and your crew are more attuned to us than we thought. And, well, we didn't anticipate just how deeply the human body would affect you. Zyron narrows his eyes. I understand that our responses are unexpected, but surely we've made progress. My crew is beginning to understand that human nudity is not inherently sexual. It's about connection, about strength and vulnerability. Dr. Winters nods, but her gaze remains fixed on him, as if weighing her next words carefully. Yes, but there's more to it than that, Captain. And I've come to realize something about the way you've been interacting with humans, not just physically but emotionally. Zyron feels a slight unease. What are you suggesting, Dr. Winters? The human woman takes a deep breath, stepping closer, her eyes searching his face. What I'm suggesting is that perhaps you're not just studying us. Perhaps you're feeling something deeper. Something that goes beyond the intellectual curiosity of your species. Zyron's heart begins to race in a way that is unfamiliar to him. It is as though the telepathic link he shares with his crew is suddenly picking up on an emotion he hasn't fully acknowledged, an intense, almost unbearable awareness of Dr. Winters. The sensation is unlike anything he's experienced before. In the presence of the human woman, he feels a sharp pang in his chest, a flutter of something alien, something outside the realm of his usual calm, controlled demeanor. He looks down, trying to focus his thoughts, but his mind is swimming. I am here to learn, Dr. Winters. That is all. I know, she says, her voice softening. But learning comes with experiences. And as we've both seen, our species are not as separate as we once thought. Maybe the boundaries we've placed between us are just walls we've built because we fear what happens when we step beyond them. Zyron looks up at her, and for the first time, he feels an unmistakable wave of emotion that isn't intellectual. His telepathic bond with her, which has always been calm and sterile, now feels charged with something deeper. He can sense her vulnerability, her openness. It's not sexual, but it's raw and undeniable. I don't understand, Zyron says quietly, his voice more vulnerable than he's ever allowed it to be. What are you suggesting, Dr. Winters? That we, our species, could become more than just diplomats and students? That we could share something deeper? Her face softens and she reaches out, placing a hand gently on his arm. The touch is unexpected, but somehow it feels natural. Human warmth, human connection. "I'm suggesting," she says gently, "that perhaps there's something more to this exchange than either of us realized. Maybe we're not just learning from each other. Maybe we're beginning to understand something more profound about what it means to be together." Zyron stands frozen, unable to speak for a moment. His mind is spinning, caught between his instincts and his intellectual understanding of what he's been taught. The RYK2 do not engage in relationships across species lines. It is taboo. It has always been taboo. And yet, here he is, feeling a connection, something stirring deep inside him. The tension between them is palpable, and Dr. Winters is the first to break it. She steps back slowly, withdrawing her hand as though giving Zyron space to process what has just occurred. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable, Captain," she says, her voice now full of gentle understanding. "But I think you and your crew are beginning to understand the human experience in a way that goes beyond observation. And that's a powerful thing. Sometimes, to truly understand a culture, you have to allow yourself to be part of it, not just from the outside but from within." Zyron is silent for a long time. He is overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she has just suggested. The idea of emotional intimacy, of allowing himself to be vulnerable with a human, feels so alien, so forbidden. And yet, the more he thinks about it, the more the idea begins to resonate with him. There is something about Dr. Winters, about the human experience, that calls to him in ways he cannot explain. Finally, after a long pause, he speaks, his voice softer than usual. I think I need time to understand. Time to process this." Dr. Winters nods, her expression empathetic. "I understand, Captain. But remember, this is an exchange not just of knowledge but of experience. We're not just studying each other, we're learning how to connect on a deeper level." Zyron watches her as she turns to leave, his mind filled with a maelstrom of thoughts. The walls that he had built around himself, the barriers that had always kept him separated from the human experience, are beginning to crumble. And in their place, a new understanding is forming, one that is far more complicated than he ever expected. The chapter ends with Zyron standing alone, looking out over the horizon as the weight of his emotions presses down on him. The future of the RYK2 and human relationship hangs in the balance, and Zyron knows that the next step will require him to confront not just the intellectual barriers between their species, but the emotional ones as well. The days following Captain Zyron's conversation with Dr. Winters are filled with a mixture of introspection and growing tension. He finds himself questioning everything he thought he knew about the mission, about humanity, and about the boundaries he has spent his entire life maintaining. The more time he spends with humans, the more he feels the weight of an unfamiliar longing deep within him. It is a longing not for knowledge or for power, but for connection, a desire to experience something beyond intellectual curiosity, beyond the cool detachment of the RYK2. But that longing remains a silent, hidden thing, one he dares not speak aloud. Zyron's crew feels the shift, though. The more they interact with humans, the more they are forced to confront the complexities of their own emotions. Lieutenant Trax, who had once scoffed at the idea of human vulnerability, now seems quieter, more introspective. His previously controlled demeanor is unraveling, his thoughts increasingly preoccupied with the human crew members he's encountered. One evening, as Zyron walks the ship's observation deck, he finds Trax standing alone, staring out into the vast expanse of space. The lieutenant's usual impassive expression is replaced by something softer, more contemplative. Zyron pauses beside him, unsure of how to approach. "You've been quiet lately, Trax," Zyron says, his voice carrying a rare tone of concern. "Is something troubling you?" Trax turns toward him slowly, his eyes unusually distant. "It is difficult, Captain," he admits, his voice quiet. "I've been thinking. Perhaps we have misunderstood the humans. Their vulnerabilities, what we once saw as weaknesses, are actually their greatest strength. Their openness, their ability to share their true selves with each other. It's unlike anything we have known." Zyron nods slowly. He's been wrestling with the same thoughts, but hearing them spoken aloud makes them feel all the more real. "It is difficult to reconcile," he says, his tone almost wistful. "Our people have always built walls to protect ourselves, to shield our minds from others. But these humans, how do they endure the exposure, the rawness of their emotions?" "They embrace it," Trax responds simply, his gaze fixed on the stars. "They do not fear vulnerability as we do. They wear their hearts on their sleeves, and in doing so, they form bonds that run deeper than we could ever understand. They are unafraid." Zyron feels a knot tighten in his chest. It's a feeling he has come to associate with Dr. Winters, but he's not sure how to process it. His thoughts are interrupted by the soft hum of the ship's intercom, and a voice rings out across the speakers. Captain Zyron, Lieutenant Trax, we have received a request for a cultural exchange event from the human delegation. They are asking for a more intimate experience, one that goes beyond observation. They want to share a part of their tradition with us, something personal. Zyron's mind races. An intimate exchange? After everything they've learned, the thought of participating in such an experience stirs an uncomfortable feeling in his gut. But the curiosity is undeniable. If the humans are willing to share something so personal, shouldn't they be ready to meet them halfway? I'll go, Zyron says finally, his voice calm but his mind a whirlwind. Prepare the crew. We will attend this exchange. The day of the cultural exchange arrives, and the atmosphere on the RYK-2 ship is one of quiet anticipation. The crew gathers in the ship's main hall, which has been specially arranged to accommodate the human guests. The humans have requested that this event take place in a space of minimal technology, where the focus will be on personal connection rather than intellectual exchange. It is to be a celebration of the human experience, a chance for the RYK-2 to truly witness the humanity that has so fascinated them. As the humans begin to arrive, Zyron feels the familiar tug of uncertainty. He watches as Dr. Winters walks toward him, her presence calming yet stirring something deep within him. She is dressed simply, in a flowing robe that reflects the natural colors of her world, earthy tones of brown and green that seem to connect her to the very essence of the planet she calls home. She meets his gaze and for a moment, it feels as though they are the only two beings in the room. Captain, she says, her voice warm but measured. I'm glad you agreed to attend. This will be an experience, something that might challenge everything you've learned so far. But it is important. I am prepared, Zyron responds, his voice steady, though there is an unspoken tension between them. The exchange begins in a way that feels almost ceremonial. The humans perform a series of dances, fluid, graceful movements that are meant to represent the flow of energy between individuals. Zyron is transfixed by the beauty of the movements, but he can't help but notice the vulnerability in the eyes of the dancers. They are unguarded, exposed. It is as though they are offering themselves fully to the RYK-2, sharing the core of their beings without reservation. As the dance reaches its peak, one of the human dancers steps towards Zyron, her body radiant with energy. She extends her hand to him, a silent invitation. Zyron stands frozen for a moment, his mind racing. The idea of physical contact with a human has always been uncomfortable for him, a line he's never crossed. But something within him urges him to take the step. This is part of the exchange. This is what it means to understand humanity. Tentatively, he reaches out and takes her hand. The contact is electric, his mind buzzing with energy, the warmth of her skin radiating through his own. For a moment he forgets where he is, his thoughts lost in the connection between them. The human woman leads him into the dance, her body moving with a fluidity and grace that seems to transcend language, transcending everything Zyron has ever known. There is no intellectual calculation in the movement, no strategy. It is pure expression, pure emotion. The music shifts and Zyron feels something deep within him stir. It is the same feeling he had when Dr. Winters spoke to him, the same feeling that has been building inside him ever since his first encounter with humanity. It is a longing, not just for knowledge but for understanding, for a bond that cannot be explained with words alone. The dance continues, and Zyron finds himself lost in the rhythm, in the connection with this human woman. For the first time he feels something break free within him. He is no longer the detached captain of the RYK-2. He is simply a being, vulnerable, open, and connected to another. The music ends and the room falls into a profound silence. Zyron stands there, breathing heavily, his body alive with the energy of the moment. The human woman smiles at him, her eyes filled with something he cannot name. Understanding, compassion, and perhaps even something more. Thank you, Zyron says quietly, his voice hoarse with emotion. Dr. Winters steps forward, her gaze soft but knowing. You understand now, don't you, Captain? Zyron looks at her, and for the first time he speaks with the depth of feeling that has been building within him. I understand. I feel connected. In a way that I never thought possible. Dr. Winters nods. That's what it means to truly exchange, Captain. To connect on a level deeper than intellect. To share yourself without fear. Zyron stands in the silence, surrounded by the human beings who have shown him something he never thought possible. The barriers are gone now, between species, between minds. And for the first time, Zyron feels a deep sense of peace. In the days following the cultural exchange, the RYK2 find themselves living in the aftermath of something profound. Captain Zyron in particular is deeply affected. The connection he shared with the human dancer, the unspoken bond that passed between them in that fleeting moment, lingers in his mind like an unshakable weight. For the first time in his life, he is questioning not only the purpose of the mission but the very foundations of his people's way of life. The walls he had spent centuries building, those mental and emotional barriers that separated him from others, are crumbling. The more he reflects, the more he realizes that it is not simply the physical act of touching, of being vulnerable, that has transformed him. It is the emotional depth of that connection, the human capacity to embrace one another without fear or hesitation. And in that understanding, Zyron finds himself torn between two worlds, the one he has always known and the new reality that now calls to him, both exhilarating and terrifying. In the privacy of his quarters, Zyron stares out at the stars. The void of space has always been a comfort to him, a space of silence and order. Yet now, as his mind swirls with new thoughts, he finds that the stars seem distant, like cold, uncaring dots in the blackness. For the first time he feels the weight of loneliness, not as a physical absence, but as an emotional void that he cannot fill with intellect alone. A soft chime from the door interrupts his thoughts, and he turns to see Dr. Winters standing at the threshold, her figure framed by the soft light of the hallway. Her presence is both grounding and unsettling, a reminder of everything he is struggling to understand. "Captain," she says, her voice gentle yet firm. "Can we talk?" Zyron nods silently, stepping aside to allow her entry. "Of course, Dr. Winters. Please come in." As she enters the room, he notices the subtle change in her demeanor. There is a quiet intensity in her gaze, an unspoken understanding that hangs between them. She takes a seat across from him, her hands folded in her lap. For a moment, neither speaks. The air between them is thick with unvoiced thoughts, but it is not uncomfortable. Instead, it feels like the calm before a storm. Finally, Dr. Winters speaks. "Captain, I know this has been difficult for you. For all of you. You came here to study us, to learn about our culture, and I'm sure you thought that it would be a simple exchange of knowledge. But what happened, what you felt, that wasn't something you could have anticipated." Zyron looks at her, his gaze steady but tinged with vulnerability. "No, I couldn't have anticipated it. I thought I understood human culture, but I've come to realize that understanding it on an intellectual level is vastly different from experiencing it, from feeling it." She nods in agreement. "Exactly. And what you felt, Captain, it wasn't weakness. It wasn't some misguided sense of submission. It was the strength of human connection. The way we open ourselves to each other, the way we are willing to expose our most vulnerable parts, and trust that the other person will accept us, flaws and all. That's something we take for granted. But it's something you've never experienced before, and I can see that it's unsettling for you." Zyron swallows, a slight tremor in his voice as he speaks. "It's not just unsettling. It's overwhelming. My people have always built walls around ourselves. We protect our minds, our hearts from outside influence. But here with the humans, I don't know how to keep those walls intact. I don't know how to shut out what I'm feeling." Dr. Winters watches him carefully, her eyes soft with empathy. "You don't have to shut it out, Captain. The walls you've built, they don't have to stay up. They've protected you, yes. But they've also kept you from experiencing what it means to truly connect with another being. And that's something that no amount of intellect or technology can provide. It's something that you can only experience when you let go of your fear and allow yourself to be vulnerable." Zyron remains silent for a moment, considering her words. The concept of vulnerability is alien to him. It has always been a weakness in his culture, a flaw to be avoided at all costs. But now, as he sits across from Dr. Winters, he feels a stirring within him, a part of himself that he has long kept hidden, telling him that maybe, just maybe, she is right. "Do you think it's possible?" he asks softly. "For a RYK2 like me to let go of everything I've known? To embrace something as uncertain as this?" Dr. Winters smiles, the warmth in her expression calming his racing thoughts. "I think it's not just possible, Captain. I think it's essential. You've seen what the humans are capable of, how we form bonds, how we share ourselves with others. But you've also seen the strength that comes with that vulnerability. The strength to love, to trust, and to accept someone else. You've been given a gift, Captain. The ability to experience that same strength. But you have to let yourself feel it. You have to let yourself be part of it." Zyron feels the weight of her words settle within him, deep in his chest. For the first time in his life, he understands something that he had never fully grasped, the concept of emotional freedom. His people have long hidden behind the armor of intellect and stoicism, fearing the exposure of their hearts. But now, as he listens to Dr. Winters, he begins to understand that true strength lies not in shutting out emotions, but in embracing them. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," he admits quietly. "I don't know if I can let go of everything I've been taught." "You don't have to be ready all at once," Dr. Winters reassures him, her voice gentle but firm. "It's a process. But you've already taken the first step by acknowledging what you're feeling. And that's the hardest part. The rest will come in time." Zyron looks at her, his mind swirling with the enormity of what she is suggesting. He knows she is right. He knows that this moment, this choice, is the beginning of something that could change the course of his life forever. And yet, a part of him hesitates. Fear is a powerful thing, and he has spent his entire existence learning to control it, to keep it at bay. But now, as he stands at the edge of a new understanding, he realizes that fear may no longer be enough to keep him from what he truly desires. "I will try," he says, his voice steady but filled with the weight of his decision. "I will try to embrace what I'm feeling. I will try to understand what it means to connect with others, without fear." Dr. Winters nods, her expression one of quiet approval. "That's all any of us can do, Captain. We don't have all the answers, but we have each other. And that's enough." Zyron looks at her for a long moment, feeling a shift within himself. There is a peace settling in his chest, a sense of clarity that has eluded him for so long. For the first time in his life, he feels like he is ready to step into the unknown, to let go of the walls that have defined him, and to experience the world in a way he never thought possible. As Dr. Winters rises to leave, Zyron feels a strange sense of calm wash over him. The journey ahead is uncertain, but it is a journey he is no longer afraid to take. The days following Captain Zyron's conversation with Dr. Winters are marked by a subtle but undeniable shift. He finds himself approaching everything with a newfound openness, though it is not without its challenges. The RYK2 are a proud, disciplined species, and for Zyron to fully embrace this new understanding of vulnerability is an act of rebellion against everything he has been taught. But each time he interacts with the human crew, each time he allows himself to connect with them on a deeper level, he feels the walls inside him weaken a little more. It is a quiet revolution, one that does not scream for attention but simmers beneath the surface of every conversation, every glance. Zyron notices it most when he's alone, when he has time to reflect on the moments he's shared with the humans, whether it's a brief conversation with Dr. Winters or a shared smile with one of the human officers. He no longer feels the cold, logical distance he once relied on to keep himself in control. Instead there is warmth. A warmth that fills the emptiness he never realized was there. As the RYK2 ship continues its mission of exploration, they come into contact with several other human vessels, each bringing new opportunities for exchange. Yet, despite the growing number of interactions, Zyron's thoughts always return to the human delegation, the crew he has come to know so intimately. In particular, he finds himself drawn to Dr. Winters. She is a constant presence in his thoughts, her voice the anchor that keeps him tethered to the emotional landscape he is learning to navigate. One day, as the crew prepares for another joint mission, Dr. Winters approaches Zyron with an idea, one that feels as if it is the culmination of everything they have shared over the past few months. "Captain," she begins, her tone serious but warm, "I've been thinking. We've learned a great deal from each other, and I believe there's something important we could do together. Something that could further our understanding of both our species." Zyron looks at her, his brow furrowed with curiosity. "What do you have in mind, Dr. Winters?" She takes a deep breath, clearly weighing her words carefully. "A joint cultural project. Something where we, both the RYK2 and the humans, combine our strengths, our unique perspectives. It could be a way to bridge the gap between our two peoples. We've seen the potential for connection, Captain. Now it's time to show the rest of the fleet what we can achieve together." Zyron's mind races. He has seen what humanity is capable of, how deeply they connect with one another, how unafraid they are to expose their emotions. But the idea of a joint project, something tangible that could bind their peoples together, is something entirely new. His first instinct is to question it, to rely on logic and reason, to wonder if it is too soon. But then he remembers the warmth he's felt in his interactions with Dr. Winters, the way she has been a constant guide for him in this uncharted emotional territory. "What kind of project did you have in mind?" he asks carefully, his voice steady but his mind curious. Dr. Winters smiles, a glimmer of excitement in her eyes. "Something simple yet profound. A combined art installation. The humans would contribute their visual art, sculptures, paintings, and digital works that represent our culture. The RYK2 would contribute our own expressions of art, which we've rarely shared. The goal would be to create something new, something that blends both of our cultures and showcases the ways in which our peoples are alike. Zyron is silent for a moment, contemplating the idea. Art has never been a focus for the RYK2. Their culture is rooted in logic, precision, and intellectual achievement. But he knows that art, in its own way, is a reflection of the soul, a reflection of the very essence of a species. If there is a way to express the connections he's come to understand, then this might be it. I will consider it, he says slowly. But there is one thing I must ask, Dr. Winters. He pauses, searching for the right words. This idea you have, it goes beyond intellectual exchange. It requires something deeper. It requires vulnerability. And I am not sure if the RYK2 are ready for that. Dr. Winters meets his gaze, her eyes filled with understanding and compassion. I think, Captain, that you've already begun the journey. The RYK2 may not be ready for this yet, but they can be. Just like you. You've seen what it means to connect. It's not something you can rush, it has to come at its own pace. But this project, this act of creation, could be a first step towards something greater. It will show both our peoples that it's okay to be vulnerable, to express ourselves, to share who we truly are. Zyron nods slowly, the weight of her words sinking in. There is still much to be done, much to be explored, but he now knows that the journey of connection is not one that can be completed in a single moment. It is a process, one that requires patience, trust, and, most importantly, the willingness to be open to the unknown. I will speak with my crew, he says finally. We will consider your proposal. But I do not know if they will be ready for what it entails. That's all anyone can ask for, Captain, Dr. Winters replies, her voice soft but full of conviction. To take that first step. To be willing to try. The next several weeks are a whirlwind of discussions, planning sessions, and exchanges between the RYK2 and the human crew. As Zyron watches his people slowly warm to the idea, he can't help but feel a sense of pride. The RYK2, while reluctant at first, begin to understand the importance of the project. Not just as a cultural exchange but as a way of creating something meaningful together. And as the pieces of the art installation begin to take shape, Zyron realizes that this project is not just about bridging the gap between two species. It is about the journey of growth, of shedding old beliefs, and of embracing the unknown. When the day finally arrives to unveil the combined art installation, the RYK2 and humans gather in the central hall of the RYK2 ship. The installation is a stunning fusion of the two cultures, human sculptures and paintings intricately woven together with the RYK2's precision-engineered holograms and geometric designs. The artwork is not just a visual feast, it is an embodiment of the connection they have formed, a testament to the progress they have made, not just as individuals, but as two peoples who have learned to embrace each other's vulnerabilities. Zyron stands at the front of the room, his heart pounding with anticipation. He looks around at the RYK2 and human faces, each filled with wonder, each seeing something in this artwork that transcends cultural boundaries. For a moment, he allows himself to feel what he has been resisting for so long, the overwhelming warmth of connection, of shared humanity. And as Dr. Winters approaches him, standing beside him in front of the art, he realizes that this moment, the culmination of all they've experienced together, is not the end of their journey. It is only the beginning. This is what we can create when we work together, she says softly, her voice filled with a quiet reverence. Zyron nods, his gaze fixed on the art, but his thoughts focused on something much deeper. Yes, this is only the beginning. And I believe that we, the RYK2 and the humans, can create something even greater in the future. Together. As he speaks, he feels something within him click, a final, quiet surrender to the journey ahead. He knows now that he will never again be the person he was when he first arrived on this ship. He has been changed by the vulnerability, the openness, and the strength of the humans around him. And for the first time he is ready to embrace the future, whatever it may hold. The end. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more exciting HFY stories. Your support means the world to us. And make sure to tap the bell icon so you never miss an update. Stay tuned for our next adventure, and until then, keep exploring the stars. See you in the next video.